teachers of Reddit, what is the worst case of my child can do no wrong have you seen? I had a student in 5th grade. He had a history of misbehavior dating back to the first week of kindergarten. He would regularly shout insults at other students, threaten them, refuse to do any work, and on several occasions, yelled at me and once threw a chair. One day, while we were taking a test, this student was talking. I quietly reminded him that it is against the rules to talk during a test and that he needs to be quiet. He kept talking. I told him that this is his last warning and that if he talks again he will need to go in the hall. He talked again, so I told him to go in the hall. He gets up, walks out, and on the way out says, "You're autistic," to me. I wrote him a referral and contacted the parents, explaining the situation. They didn't pick up the phone. So I sent an email, oops, and I ended the email saying that I hope we can work together to help student be successful. I received a rage-filled email back saying that my behavior is unacceptable, that I'm targeting her son and I'm out to get him, and that I will be hearing from her lawyer. This woman is a cop. She went all the way to the district level to complain about me and made up all kinds of lies about me and told the other parents. Oh, and once, after a different incident where he physically assaulted another kid, he was suspended for a day. Mommy took him to Disney World. I've wanted to get this off my chest for a while now, taught previously, but this is as a parent. Our son, who is 3, is in school. His classmate Winnie and her mom Louisa are the worst people you've ever met. First, Winnie has a restrictive diet for no other reason than her parents want to try it. They will send a list of approved foods and quantities for her with the expectation that all leftovers are to be put in Tupperware and given to Winnie to take home. The food is so odd and weird that we wouldn't eat it anyway, but that's the expectation. If Winnie is at a party, Winnie must win at least 50% of the games. Even if there are 20 kids, Winnie must be served first. She must have extra time when playing with children and Winnie must not be, under any circumstances, told what not to do. The kids of this class have parties and Winnie was invited twice and then not. Her mother flew off the handle and sent a nasty letter to parents about how this was unjust and her darling Winifred was crying at being left out. Her daughter has no boundaries, is unruly, rude, difficult and eats what can only be described as pre-vomit. Her mother runs a small health consulting business and will constantly try the hard sell with you. It's intrusive, invasive and really tone deaf, but she won't stop continually begging for service. She's awful. Her daughter is awful, and they're always at social events. Once I had a piano student whose mother made him take lessons, even though his heart wasn't in it. For several weeks, he'd come back with exactly the same mistakes as the week before, and with no sign of improvement. I made it comfortable for him to describe weekly practice and his thoughts about taking piano lessons. He said that he had no interest in the piano or any other instrument and that he pretended to practice to get his mother off his back. I told his mom that forcing him to take lessons was a mistake, that his heart wasn't in it, and that it might turn him against music forever to persist. She said, "He's a gifted student and he'd never waste practice time." I simply said that I have his best interests in mind and that he needs to pursue something he's genuinely interested in and not be coerced into studying as a result of parental pressure. The boy gave me an appreciative hug, but his mom looked daggers at me as they walked away. Running onto a soccer field to scream at the referee about a call and getting banned from athletics for a year. That mother was a treat. One of my child patients spit on my face once when I asked him what got him into trouble at school. His mother was right beside him and she said nothing until I glared at her for like 5 seconds, after which she pretended to scold the child. My first year of teaching I taught early elementary, but had to teach a single grade 7 options class where I saw the students 2x a week for 40 minutes. I had one student who didn't hand in a project and marked him accordingly. Parent-teacher night came and mom shows up. She closes the door, spends 5 minutes addressing her son's marks and asking about whether he could still hand in the project, to which I replied sure. She then spends 20 minutes telling me her son thinks I hate him and how everyone, and I mean everyone, loves her son. She went on long rambling stories about former teachers, coaches, etc. and how everyone really loves him and I just really need to spend some time with him so I would see how special he was. I finally told her I couldn't possibly hate her child because I barely knew who he was because I spend 98% of my time teaching on the opposite side of the school. Not a smart thing to say, but the rambling stories that we were 25 minutes into what was supposed to be a 10-minute interview. Her passive-aggressive nature and the fact that she was so high on her son was starting to irritate me. I asked her what type of reasonable solution she wanted, and she told me my personality was clearly the problem. She then got up to leave, but returned to tell me that though she wasn't a teacher and wouldn't tell me how to do my job and spent 5 minutes telling me all the ways I'm personally failing her child. Anyway, that was an important first year teacher moment. Never again would I let a parent treat me like that. We have this kind of meeting every year with his teachers. We know, son's name, can't do multiplication. He was a freshman in high school in pre-algebra. How he passed 3rd 8th grade is beyond me besides teachers just passing him to get rid of him. These people had money. They had resources. They cold gotten him tutoring years ago to help him. Instead they preferred we just pass him and excuse his acting out because he refused and couldn't do the work because he didn't have the basic foundation. He couldn't do multiplication, so he couldn't do division. And it all spiraled from there. They were so calm about it. Like, what's the problem with that? So what? I was floored. I was accused of slamming a door into a teenage student's face. It didn't happen. The CCTV showed it didn't happen. The door had a fire safety feature meaning it could not be slammed. The mum still claimed her precious son would never lie, so me. Cameras and physics must be wrong. I also had a student in kindergarten who regularly punched other students, ran around the room, and refused to do work. His mother called for a conference, and the first thing she said was that his behavior was my fault. She had him switched out of my class. Thank God. While I've never been a traditional teacher, I did give swimming lessons for a short time while in high school. Most of my students and their parents were very appreciative of how I conducted my classes. But there was one woman who seemed utterly convinced that I was doing her child a disservice. The boy in question was afraid of putting his head beneath the water, which is a common enough problem, so we had been slowly working through various ways of helping him overcome that fear. Unfortunately, every single time that his mother was nearby, she would scream about how I had no right to force her son to do anything, after which she would loudly address him, as though nobody else was within earshot. "Are you okay, honey?" she'd ask. "You remember what mommy said, okay? You do not listen to that man. You are perfect. And you do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay? Tell me that you hear me." The poor kid would mutter his acknowledgements, then sulk near the edge of the pool until his mother finally left. The good news is that the woman would almost always disappear not long after dropping off her son, leaving me to start undoing the damage. I'd like to think that I still had a positive impact on the boy's life. But something tells me that someone had mistaken swimming lessons for a particularly wet babysitting service. I was a tar in a kindergarten classroom and had reminded this little kid, 5 meters, in April, over halfway through the school year, about our rule that we only have healthy snacks at snack time. He started whining and crying about how his mom lets him have cookies whenever he wants. Anyway, the teacher steps in and mentions that he has a delicious looking apple in his lunch bag. He then gets up, throws a chair, and begins to flip tables and tear the class apart while telling the teacher his mom is going to bring a gun and shoot her. At this moment a threat has been issued, so we bring in the principal. She gets there and begins an effort to talk the student down to no avail. He just keeps going on and on about how his mom has a gun and will shoot everyone at the school, and if we call the police she is going to shoot them too. The mother is then called. No answer, of course. So we send this kid with the principal and go about our day. After school is over, the teacher, principal and I start putting together an email to the parent. The kid was in after school care, so we couldn't have a chat after school. We just hit the major points of defiance and handling his anger in a more positive manner. I get to school the next day and the teacher shows me the response. The first line read, "Why didn't you just let him have the cookie?" And it went on to say that you as educators are not doing our job. If a child is getting as angry as he is, it is our job to keep him from getting mad, and we failed at it today. That day he came in and told us that mommy bought him a new Lego set. I worked the school age room in a child care center. My youngest kiddo was 5 and 11 to 12 was supposed to be the maximum age in that room. The center director had a 14-year-old who was bored at home. So she would bring her in and have her help, but instead she ran a pack of mean girls who were constantly defying my instructions and picking on the younger kids. She'd go in and out of the room whenever she felt like it, and when I brought it up to the director as a problem she said, "Are you saying that my child is the problem? I've told her that she should be helping you, and she tells me about how helpful she is and that she is constantly doing things for you. How can you complain about her?" No, she's not doing those things at all. Your 14-year-old is manipulating you like 14-year-olds do. High school teacher here, and I happen to teach IB, International Baccalaureate, classes. Basically, kind of like AP classes in the US, but towards an internationally recognized diploma program instead. Anyway, my students had an assessment that they needed to submit for their diploma. We had been working on it for months, editing and revising, etc. This one student, we'll call him Mark, never submitted anything throughout all of these months. I had sent countless emails home and to his counselor with very little response. Mark assured me, however, that he would have it done before the final submission date, on the day of the final submission. However, I get an email from him informing me that he will not be coming to school because his dog broke both of its front paws and would need to be taken care of whilst his parents were at work. He attached a photo of a Yorkie in leg braces because he said he knew I would be suspicious. Knowing that this was 100% BS, I googled Yorkie in leg braces and lo and behold, it was the second photo that came up, belonged to some animal orthopedic website. Fortunately, his mother happened to be in the building that day for some other meeting, and I was able to track her down. I explained the situation, showed her the email, and her response, "Oh my goodness, that does look like our dog. I need to go right away and check on him, lady. It's not your dog."